Deep inside, I'm scared. Every time I make a big decision, I'm scared. Changing jobs, I'm scared to death, or changing countries. But I still do it, despite the fear. And I think that's what I should have mentioned, that, I started teaching because I was scared of public speaking. Nothing better than standing in front of the group of 40, young adults who are really tough crowds and tough audience, and try to teach them, foundations of marketing on consumer behavior or something with an accent. Being almost, when I started teaching, I probably wasn't not much older than they were. So that's how I do it. I just throw myself into something that I'm scared about.
G'day, I'm Rob Malicki. Welcome to the Global Horizons podcast. I'm coming today from Garigal Land in Sydney. And my guest today is Yara Vasina, who's now the brand new Deputy Director at the University of Auckland International. Yara, thanks for joining me on Global Horizons.
Thanks so much, Rob. Such a pleasure to be here and talking to you all the way from Auckland, New Zealand.
And if I can paint a picture for our listeners, it's October 2013. You're in the offices of KPMG in Moscow, and it's late in the evening, so it's dark outside, and the cursor of your mouse is hovering over a submit button on a website. You're feeling hopeful, but you're also feeling like you're throwing your hat in the ring for something and you really haven't got that much chance. So, heck, you've got nothing to lose. And you click that submit button, probably forget all about it and go back to work. Can you tell me the story of that moment when you hit submit? What's it all about?
So what are you referring to? It's Australia's Win Your Future Limited competition. So basically the government wanted to promote education here, and the goal was to create a campaign for entrants to design digital postcards and explain in 50 words what do they want to achieve in their future and how Australian education would help them in this endeavor. And I should mention, I used to work as a management consultant, hence KPMG, in my previous lives. I also worked for UI, but I always knew I wanted to study overseas. And I also wanted to have an international career. I was imagining myself living in multiple countries, doing, amazing things, although I was really time poor. So those of you who, worked in management consultancy know that the workload is insane. So I didn't have much time to apply for scholarships or grants. So when I saw this competition and only 50 words, I thought, of course I can do this. I had an idea. I'll show a postcard in a bit later. So I submitted it, as you said, it was quite late in the evening. And then I forgot all this. So in a few weeks, I had this call from Australian Embassy in Moscow, and they were congratulating me on being a winner of week 4, blah, blah, blah. And I thought it's a scam. So in Eastern Europe or in Russia, they call you, congratulations, you won a car, but you need to pay X amount of money. And I thought it's probably something weird. So I put my phone back, and then they called again. And I still remember this spot on 41st floor in this office in Moscow City, overlooking the whole city. And I couldn't believe what's happening, because my postcard was chosen out of 37,000 entries from around 190 countries. So they chose 7 lucky people who won 2 weeks trip to Australia and plus scholarship to study in Australia as well.
That's extraordinary.
I traveled in December 2013, and I just fell in love with Sydney. I fell in love with Australia, and I knew exactly where I want to be and what I wanted to do.
Such an incredible story. And God, I had no idea that it was so many entries. 1 in 37,000 is enormous.
Yeah, so this campaign, I think it attracted more than 2.5 million users online. There was a significant investment of the government, plus 26 education institutions and corporate sponsors. It was a huge investment back then. And I, literally thinking this little postcard, me in between Moscow and Sydney, it changed my life. And I'm so grateful, now to call myself Australian. Sydney is one of my many homes now. And still having these beautiful connections with people who actually from Australia who led this campaign. And with all the education providers, I worked for some of the institutions later on, and that's how really this sparked my interest in career and international education as well.
looking at the postcard now, for those people who are listening to this on the podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, Yara's actually got the original postcard. Pretty cool. For those of you who are listening, though, the postcard is sort of divided down the middle, and on the left-hand side, you have this sort of black and white photo of Moscow high-rise apartment buildings, and then on the right side, in vivid blue colour, you have a shot, an aerial shot of Sydney Harbour, and smack in the middle is Yara in 2013 standing there with her hand outstretched, pointing towards Sydney Harbour, and the designer or Yara has drawn around her neck this like little number 1 symbol, which is really great. And then on the back, these sort of 50 words talking about, your dream to pursue urban planning as a postgrad degree, and the fact that Australian cities are model cities to live in. So urban planning, is that what you actually ended up going on to do here?
Not exactly, because I used to work in real estate consulting. So as a management consultant, I had a specialization in hotel development. So I thought it would be a fantastic opportunity to study and expand my knowledge of urban planning. But then it had some thoughts in regards to, finding jobs and employment, maybe in local, councils or government. And I really was hesitating. So I thought I would choose something more business related. So I did my master's degree at UNSW, majored in marketing, which in hindsight, I think really helped me with my, further jobs and career. But I still, I have a friend who has done a planning degree in Melbourne, and, there's fantastic time there. So maybe I should have done it. But again, it really changed my career, because I really wanted to do something more with people, especially in a cross-cultural environment. I really didn't want to go back to, financial models and working on more sort of numbers rather than people relationships. And that's how, starting my journey in Australia with my degree and studying really helped, get to know people, get involved in multiple things, and also get my first job at UNSW as well.
Do you remember the moment you first walked onto campus at UNSW? Do you remember how you were feeling? Your first reaction?
Nervous and excited, and also completely shocked. They were, claiming one of the most international universities in, New South Wales, and it was true. There were so many people from different nationalities and countries, and the colors. I was completely similar to this postcard. Blue sky, and then these flowers on campus and green grass at the oval, and I was just, I really felt like it's my new home. And I used to live on campus or near campus, so I really immersed myself for the first year in this, student's life. Even though I was a mature age student, I had a number of years of, professional experience, but I still really embraced. And first semester, I think I was studying full time, and then I got involved with a few projects at the UNSW International. And that was a wonderful experience as well.
I'm keen to explore that, but I'm curious, because I've never been to Russia. What's a Russian university like by comparison? And by that, I mean like both physically, like what does it look like? And then what's it like as a sort of study environment? How's it, how do the lectures approach things?
So I did my undergrad degree in economics in Moscow. It really was such a different experience in approaches to learning. And so let's start with the physical environment, much less, colorful, less engaging, big grey buildings, usually quite centralized. So the, buildings were, next to each other, and we had massive lecture halls. I remember for, hundreds and hundreds of students. And of course, the further away you sit, the more engaged you are with your classmates rather than with the contents of the lecture.
At least that's consistent with Australia.
But the approach, I remember that's why it really helps me, because I've been teaching at UTS as a sessional academic for the last 6 years. So it really helps me to engage with students from different countries, because I remember how different it was when I started doing my master's degree here in Australia. It was really, the whole approach in Russia was your professor is basically like a god. You trust them, you believe them, you never question what they say, so you're there to learn from them. And when I started my degree in Sydney, I was completely fascinated by my, classmates, how they were debating and questioning things with our professors and really bringing some examples from their work and careers. And I just loved this, but I didn't feel as confident as they were, especially during my first subjects, to really bring my ideas, because my, Russian approach to learning was you sort of sit there and the information has been fed to you. I think this, similar approach, adopted in multiple countries. And that's why when students come here as international students, it's really, we need to pay a lot of attention how we engage them and how we can help them, because it's completely different learning environment. And that's what I do in my tutorials as well. So I try to bring this understanding and sort of nurturing side of me as a, sessional academic to really, engage them in different activities. Some students might not be comfortable doing, putting maybe their hands up and presenting something. So we've got, online chats where they can type the message or type an answer. And because I do remember myself and how completely terrifying yet fascinating it was to explore completely different education system.
Do you feel like you settled into that new approach to education comfortably, or was it a process for you to adapt to it?
Well, it's been a while, but I do think it was a process. Both learning environment and also working culture, I found it quite different.
Okay, that I'm keen to explore. Okay, so let's talk work culture for a second. So you've obviously got like a vast amount of experience. So you've got this experience in Russia, working in management consulting, moved into the university sector here as well. You've worked for State New South Wales. Now you're over in Auckland at the Uni of Auckland. So let's talk about, like work differences. Tell me about that.
Maybe probably similar to, learning culture. So my first job in Australia was working for University of Auckland International. And I was, quite, maybe, a bit shy and not confident in my, accent and language. And I was doing completely different things to what I'm used to, creating financial models and working with big developers. So it was more, my first project was to organize agent workshop for all the UNSW agents across the world. So the goal was to bring them to Sydney for 5 days and to create this program of engaging events. So the work itself involved working with different faculties and departments, and which was exciting, but I was so scared because I thought, what if, because I had to, phone many people, what if I don't understand what they're telling me? Even though I learned English my whole life. So, how all the accent is quite different to what we learned in Russia, very proper sort of British textbooks. And so sometimes some words, expressions were completely, I couldn't. Someone mentioned, I'll see you in the hour. I tried to Google, where do I go? Where is this hour? So going back to your question about the culture, it was so friendly and casual and informal. And it really took me a while to get my head around how do I approach my boss or how do I approach my colleagues? Because again, I was used to much more formal, much more hierarchical approach to work. You don't disagree with your boss. You sort of, even if you think his approach is not the best or most effective, you just follow the lead because you trust your leader. So I'm obviously, I've learned and adapted, and now I much prefer this, I guess, much more casual approach to work and work relationships as well. But back then it was a huge adjustment.
I mean, knowing you a bit, you seem like a doer. You seem like one of those kind of proactive people that will just take things on. So it seems like it's probably a better fit for your personality, right?
Well, I love it. Yeah, absolutely. And, some people say that geography really doesn't matter, but I think geography changes you as a person. Yara now and 10 years ago is two completely different people. I think I'm much more open, much more, trusting, much more optimistic and easygoing than I was. And that's, thanks to Australia and all the wonderful colleagues and managers and bosses and mentors I had.
That's fascinating, actually. Looking back, it's almost like you're looking back at an entirely different you, isn't it?
Absolutely. So it's not just, career-wise, I changed careers, not just, my home address, but it's more even thinking about personality and what you bring to people and your approach to things and approach to life. So I was incredibly lucky, to win this, to be a semi-finalist of this Winning Your Future Leadership campaign, and also to, of course, as they say, luck is what preparation meets an opportunity. So of course I love wearing multiple hats. As I mentioned, in addition to my professional career, I had been teaching for a while now. So I volunteered for many organizations, but I do think that, being in a different country which suits you and your personality a bit more really plays a big role.
I want to come to that expression. So for those people who don't see the back end of a podcast, Yara and I, before we have this conversation, before we record, we actually had quite a nice conversation about a week ago, where we sort of talk about what we might talk about, what might come up during the conversation, that sort of things. And I actually wrote that down. You used the same expression, that luck is simply the sort of combination of opportunity and preparation. And I wrote that down because I think it's a beautiful, not only a beautiful expression, but when you actually think about that, it sort of puts a lot more control back into your hands. So what does that mean to you, this expression? Where did you find this expression, and where else has it applied in your life?
A really good friend of mine and mentor who I met during my first year in Sydney. So I was taking part in ISLA. It was a program by City of Sydney for international students, how to engage them and provide some leadership training. And this now friend of mine, she was a cross-cultural facilitator for one of the sessions there. So we kept in touch, and it's a really, beautiful connection. I admire this person. So she mentioned this, and it's stuck in my head because I always thought, what can you do? People are either lucky or unlucky, right? But then when she mentioned this, it really made me think and reflect on my journey to date. Saying yes to so many different things. So, all my friends, they laugh because my life is literally scheduled in half-an-hour increments because I can't cut anything because everything I do, I truly enjoy. I love, and I'm one of those lucky people who love their jobs, who love their career. And I get, I read the news about international education on the weekend because I'm really interested. I'm passionate about this area because maybe I was an international student myself. So it really, follows my whole journey. So, one thing, saying yes to things and be open to opportunities, being open to people because you never know, opportunities come through people. So, and sometimes quite, on the surface connection, you meet someone at a conference or you work, as I did, I think that's how we met, Rob. I worked for a few months for UNSW, working with Michelle Coppard on New Colombo Plan. And you helped us create this automated journey. I think that's how we met quite a few years ago. And, who would have thought back then that we'll be chatting here, you in Sydney, me in Auckland, about Australia's Win Your Future Limited, So it's the beauty of life and beauty of our industry as well. Most of the people, they're so open and welcoming and supportive and really keen to share the knowledge, share connections. And those, some people might look at my CV on my LinkedIn page and think, she had such a, sort of smooth career journey. But yes, on paper, it looks quite impressive. I may say so myself, but there were so many turns and twists and really hard times. And I'm so grateful for people, for my colleagues, for my mentors who might not think as mentors, but I really look up on them and really admire the way they treat people, admire the way they work, the way they present, and I learn from them. And I don't think I will ever stop learning, and that's the beauty of it.
What's the craziest thing you've said yes to? Other than coming to Australia, of course, but jumping on a plane and leaving everything behind.
Yeah, so I did actually was thinking that I was going to study in the US and the UK, so Australia was never on the cards, to be honest. So moving to Australia, quitting my career, I literally moved with 32 kilos in my luggage and I didn't know anyone. So I remember that feeling, leaving the airport, had no friends, no family members, no one. And the smell of flowers, remember the Sydney airport, and just the sense of pure adventure mixed with complete, adrenaline rush when you're thinking, oh, gosh, I don't know if it will work out, but I'll do my best. So that's probably one of the craziest things. And another example of, throwing my head in the ring, a number of years ago, I applied for the Churchill Fellowship. So that's an award and international scholarship for Australians to study overseas, to travel and learn the best practice in their particular area and then bring it back to Australia. So my project was to learn about virtual global ability experiences because back then, so I got it in 2020. And as we all remember, COVID hit, borders were shut, so we couldn't, and I was managing outbound short programs and exchange for ETS back then. So we couldn't do anything. So my idea was to launch virtual programs. Back then, we couldn't find anything similar in Australia. So I was, again, lucky enough to use this word to travel overseas when borders reopened. So I traveled to the US, Canada, Ireland, the UK, Germany, and Netherlands to talk with industry colleagues and learn from them how they've managed virtual programs. And some of them have been doing this for 20 odd years and then bringing back to Australia. So it's another crazy thing which I thought I would never get it. And then, here was I completely, changing cities, changing countries every few days and speaking with, the most experienced people around the globe. That was amazing. And probably moving to Auckland again. So I've never planned, to live in New Zealand. I never planned that I will end up in Auckland. But again, here I am. And it's been a few weeks. Absolutely amazing. The team is fantastic. I should say it's a bit colder here than I expected. But
I loved in our pre-podcast chat, you described yourself as a weather immigrant.
That's exactly
a weather immigrant.
Some people say, "Oh, why did you move to Sydney?" Because of the weather and the beauty of it. And I still, I miss it. But again, it's going back to your question. I think having said yes to this amazing opportunity again will hopefully bring so many more amazing connections, and I hope to learn and help the team here as well.
You can't afford to miss the Australian International Education Conference, happening from the 22nd to the 25th of October at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. AIEC's the place to meet over 1,600 international education delegates from Australia and overseas. Build your own learning schedule, gain insights from sector experts, new research findings, and spark ideas at lively discussion sessions. Plus, there's plenty of networking opportunities, from the expo hall to brain dates and social events. Make sure you're at AIEC 2024 in Melbourne. Learn more at aiec.idp.com.
Where does your fearlessness come from? Because, this is the second time that you've uprooted everything and gone to a completely new country. But also, in terms of your career as well, you've gone from management consulting into international higher education. It takes a lot of guts to change jobs. So where does that come from, the fearlessness?
Thank you. Never thought about this in that way. My grandfather was one of 8 or 9 kids, I think. None of them went to university except for him. So he was so-called, first in family. So he finished university and then he became diplomat. So he lived most of his life in Finland and Poland. And he was really breaking the stereotypes and barriers for someone with no connections, no prior, no knowledge or education. And back then it was, USSR. So completely where the whole country could never travel overseas. He lived, the whole life and had these amazing experiences. So I think growing up in his family, and we traveled a lot when I was a kid as well. Thanks to my mom, she had and still has very adventurous spirit. So we, traveled, we went skiing, we went to the, seaside, of course, completely on the budget. But it's really, that's how I developed passion for travel and learning. And also thinking, what's worst could happen, right? And I stick to this. It's better to try and regret than regret that you haven't tried things. That keeps me now pushing, going forward and trying different things. And hopefully, if I inspire someone, at least one person, it would make me really happy. And especially if this person is female, immigrant with accent, and changing countries or careers as well. But it's a cherry on top.
It's interesting, isn't it? I often think about this moment that we all face in not just like the big decisions, but even just in day-to-day life, where we're on this kind of path that we're doing. We're in our routine, and something else, the path pops up that might take us in a slightly different direction or in a completely different direction. And often it's just friction that stops us from taking those opportunities. So I love that. I love that expression you use. Like it's better to try and regret than to regret that you didn't try. But once again, it's a great attitude, right? That's hard to. If you haven't got that, it's easy to admire people that just go for stuff. If that's not you, it can almost feel crippling to some extent that you can see this interesting path, but you just can't push yourself to take it. So what do you say to that person that maybe feels that way, that it's almost like a door they can't open, if that makes sense?
Well, it all comes down to mindset, right? It's a patterns of thinking, patterns of behavior. And I truly believe in the growth mindset. I believe that we can change the way we think and the way we talk to ourselves. So if someone has never traveled or never, experienced things, I would really suggest try and, catch the way you talk to yourself, catch what you're thinking and telling yourself, am I not good enough? Or am I, will I succeed? Or what if this or what if that? Again, it's, we're lucky to be living in developed world, and if something doesn't work out, there are a million other options or ways, and I tend to believe that people support those who try things, who put their best work, who do things, and rather than sitting just and not moving much, and moving both metaphorically and physically.
That's so true, isn't it? I completely believe that. I mean, particularly if you spend any amount of time on LinkedIn, some people will say, oh, it's like self-promotion, but it's actually not about self-promotion, I think. I think it's just about sharing your story. And the more you share your story with other people, the more people can attach themselves to it, they can understand it, and then they see opportunities to try and help you. So going back to what you'd sort of said about luck, preparation versus preparation and opportunity, when you share that story, it opens up the possibility that somebody can support you.
Absolutely. But also I can understand how scary it might be.
Yeah.
Sometimes I also think twice, should I post this or not on LinkedIn? Because people are scared of judgment. People are scared of what my colleagues would think, or what my, former boss will think. And I completely understand this because I can relate. But again, I also agree with you. If you don't share your latest project, or if you don't share what you think about, particular issue, what's happening in the industry, people wouldn't know and wouldn't be able to connect with you. So I think there is a right balance between so-called, as you said, self-promotion, but also sharing, contributing to the industry, and, creating those opportunities, the connections, and sparking the new ideas and new partnerships. And thanks so much for your podcast. I'm actually a huge fan, and I've listened to all episodes, and the latest one about dual degrees. It really was fascinating to listen, and it sparked a few. So I shared this episode with my colleagues here. Yeah. It sparked a few conversations, and that's how, you plant a seed, and then you meet people who might, bring other angles to different points of views as well.
Yeah, I really believe that. When we started our first business, AIM Overseas, which ended up becoming a very, very successful third-party provider of study programs for Australian uni students, overseas study options. And I remember, I kind of wanted to keep our cards close to our chest. I didn't want to talk too much about it. And I've come to realise that was quite a mistake, because people got their own life going on. They're doing their own thing. And when you give them an opportunity, when you tell them what you're working on and you ask for help, most people actually are pretty open and even keen to help and support you. And I think that's particularly true for young people. So, if you're early in your career, putting your hand up for opportunities, joining the International Education Association and stepping up to become part of the young leaders, the young professionals group. And I know that's something that you've done. And those sorts of things, it just allows like a contact point. Actually, what popped into my mind was like a virus, the surface of a virus, which has all these pointy bits and allows people to hook onto you and hook onto your interests and connect with you and support you. And that just comes from us being willing to share some of ourselves.
Absolutely. But also what I've noticed, there's also fear of success. It might sound a bit strange, but we all know that, for example, leadership is quite a lonely experience. Once you're not part of the team, but you're managing the team and you're making sometimes quite unpopular decisions, it's not easy. So some people prefer not to engage at this level, which is absolutely fine. Actually, it's great. And I absolutely believe that self-awareness is one of our most helpful skills in life and career as well, to know exactly what you want to do and where you want to be. Do you want to manage people, or which area of international education you want to be? What excites you? And I'm all for doing what makes you smile in the morning. I wake up and and it's funny because again, I love what I do. And yes, there are days when I'm exhausted, and sometimes some things are quite boring. And of course, it can't be all rosy. But generally speaking, I never think I've never been a 9-to-5 person. I really value freedom, flexibility, and fun, which comes with, working with people from multiple countries and cultures on different projects. So I truly believe in trying to, I would suggest everyone to just reflect what makes you smile, what makes you enjoy what you do, and try to find it and try to move to that role or to that area. And if you don't know, talk to people. I've been lucky now that I approached quite a few very, established leaders in the industry and was asking them just questions, how do they find, what do they love about their jobs or what they don't? It really helps you sort of create this narrative or create a better understanding of our industry, because there's so many multiple ways. As you mentioned, you started your own, multiple businesses, and it's fascinating in itself. And I think people don't know, or maybe I, throughout my journey, wasn't aware of how many different angles and entry points and opportunities there were. I always thought, okay, so working for a university in international office, that's the main sort of pathway. But there's so many, fascinating and fantastic options. And in the book, I think it was a LinkedIn that I read many, many years ago, by Sheryl Sandberg, and she was saying it's not a career ladder anymore, it's a career jungle. And I can't agree more. It's not people changing jobs and careers multiple times now throughout their life. So it's not one pathway that, definitely leads you to success. And also in definition of success, it's so different, depends on the person. It's another, learning that I actually, it was a good lesson for me to understand that, people are driven by different things. And I think that helps me now, managing teams and working in quite a complex institution with multiple players, just to understand that we're all driven by different things.
Yeah, very true. I love how you said earlier that, opportunity comes through people. So as you go through these different stages and careers and working with different people, just try to always do the right thing, act honorably, help people wherever you can. That stuff counts for so much the further you get into your career, doesn't it? Because suddenly the people around you are also moving up. They become managers, directors, leaders, and that is your network.
Absolutely. And, sometimes for you, it might be just a quick comment or just a quick reassuring word or just a smile, but this person will remember it forever, or I'm still so grateful for people back at UNSW who gave me this opportunity for this first casual, few days a week project, which led to, quite really interesting career.
So I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile, and here you say, in my spare time, I'm an equestrian, a kayaker, an avid reader, a hiker, an amateur tennis player, board games winner, I want to come back to that one, health and wellbeing geek, tiny homes enthusiast, and a non-tourist destinations explorer. That's quite the list. I'm trying to decide which one to pick up. Board games winner. So clearly, you've got, you love people, but you're obviously very ambitious too. Firstly, what's your favourite board game?
So in Russia, we had something similar to Uno, but it's actually called Svintus. So it's based on the office politics, and on each of the cards there is a picture of a pig, and the pig is doing something like standing next to the coffee machine or doing printing stuff. So similar approach to Uno, but it's much more fun and much more engaging. So I think it's one of my favorite games, and I'm a little bit competitive. So it's, for me, I just can't, just take part in the game. So I need to win. And I remember at some stage I worked for arts and social sciences faculty at USW, and we had this stuff, I think it was Christmas party. And I had a huge Jenga there in the park. And I, of course, I was playing with, I think I saw Sundin for education back then, and I just completely forgot with who I was playing. So I really needed to win. So I was completely immersed. I did win, but I'm not sure if it was a career-limiting game. But yeah, you might have noticed. So I have quite a few interests and hobbies. And as I said, I love wearing multiple hats. I volunteered for the Welcome Dinner Project. So it was a non-for-profit that connected newly arrived immigrants or students or refugees to established Australians. I volunteered for professional associations. I love hiking. One of my ex-colleagues from Study New South Wales wished me to explore all the New Zealand hikes while I'm here. And he had no doubt I will do this in a few months. So it was a challenge I had to accept. So yeah, and I love horse riding. I think it's a fun fact that I always bring to my workplace. I used to train quite a lot. I did a bit of both dressage and show jumping. And I really look forward to getting back to it once I'm settled a bit more in Auckland.
Where do you get the energy from? So are you that sort of person that goes off into the wilderness by yourself and that's how you recharge? Or are you the kind of classic extrovert where, you go into a room full of people and that energy of a crowd fires you up?
I think I'm a social introvert. I love people. I get inspired by people. Absolutely, I think it's fascinating to meet different people and learn from them. But I do get tired. I need this time, as you said, in nature, just to immerse myself at the beach or in the park or do something outside of laptop as well. It gives me energy. And also trying to change, saying yes to different projects. Teaching, but people might think, and again, my friends all laugh because I do so many different things. I think that how my brain relaxes when you switch task or you switch the project or you switch to assignment as well. Or just, having a quick, and I think also, again, going through this sort of self-reflection and self-awareness journey, I learned what gives me energy and what takes my energy. So, for example, maybe it's, cultural thing. I absolutely hate small talk. Nothing worse for me at the networking event and, discussing weather or something. I would rather really chat with someone about meaning of life and love and career and really go, and I go, deep quite quick. So it might not be the most welcomed approach, especially in Australia or New Zealand. But again, I know that just a few minutes of this deeper conversation will really energize me rather than take the energy.
How do you get there? I mean, I'm the same as you. I would rather just cut to the chase and get to something that's kind of meaty and interesting. But how do you do that? You're in a networking event. There's 100 people in a room. Everybody's standing in small closed groups. How do you crack that egg?
Well, it doesn't always happen, but when it does, it really builds sometimes beautiful friendships or beautiful connections. And a number of my close friends were actually met at IAA networking drinks years ago. So, but I guess I start with myself. So I just, bring my whole self. I being open and honest and vulnerable and just, share if I feel nervous or I feel a bit out of this, is it your first time here as well? Or, what brought you here? So it's simple but not easy approach of being honest, how you feel or, or what's happening right now in your life or in your work. And trying, because I find the more vulnerable you are, the more people open up. So it's not one-way street. It's always give and take. It doesn't always happen, but when it does, as I mentioned, creates beautiful connections, but also I feel energized and I feel really grateful and appreciative of that person and that connection and conversation we had.
Yeah, it's magical, isn't it? And it definitely, part of that is sharing something of yourself that maybe seems a little bit awkward. And I really find that kind of networking environment, you almost need to surprise people in some way. Because, everyone has this expectation you're standing around in a group and you're going to talk about the weather and all that big thing that the government did that's irritated everybody. That's what everyone's expecting. And so when you break the mold in some way, I think you crack the facade and you open the opportunity for something interesting to happen. And that's the one that I really, I just bring curiosity. I find curiosity, and I asked this of you earlier a couple of times. I'm just like, where does that come from? You've got this attitude, where did that come from? Or you can, when you're standing around that networking group and you see that somebody, you observe either they're fearless or they're funny or they're scared or they're fill in the blank. That's your chance to just put a name on it and say, you are X. Where did you get that? Because I respect it. I want some of that,
That's such a good point, all about curiosity as well. And I love people. And as I said, I'm excited by people. And I'm truly fascinated by, someone who is such a fantastic presenter or fantastic, networker who just works the room. And there is so much I can still learn and hopefully, help someone as well. So I try. So next week I will be speaking at Fellowship and Scholarship Forum, which is held in Canberra, but I will be joining online. And I always try to, bring and ask people what I can help with. Because obviously, it's a good opportunity, but, for the chair of the panel, for example. And there is so much, and I'm always happy to do, pro bono work or help with advice or help with connection. There is nothing more that I actually enjoy is connecting people on both professional and personal level. And thankfully, it's been a big part of my jobs. And also, bringing new ideas and talking them through with different people and testing them quickly. It's quite, unfortunately, it's quite hard, obviously, to move, fast enough while you're working for the biggest institution. But you need to, as you said, identify people who have the same energy or the same level of curiosity to try new things and to, learn, maybe fail fast and try different things.
I'm so torn about what to ask you next. I'm interested to talk more about travel, but I'm also curious to explore that dynamic of being like a doer inside an institution, because there is like this oxymoron, this contradiction, right, between big institutions that have to be governed by systems and processes and orderliness, and then the disruption, because it's that innovation and disruption that actually helps to move successful organizations forward. But that's kind of an uncomfortable role to play, isn't it, inside a larger organization?
Absolutely. And, with virtual programs that we launched at UTS, it wasn't a smooth process because it was all about changing mindset. How can we really convince both faculty members or parents or students that by engaged in virtual learning approach opportunities, they still get cross-cultural experience and those skills that we wanted students to have? And the same as now, obviously, there's so many, government changes and regulations coming into play. So how we can think creatively, and, now it's a huge light has been shed on T&Es as well. Everyone is talking of thinking, but again, identifying those people who would help you within the institution really helps for the quick win, or just identifying those with the same mindset and what drives them. Fantastic student experience, or how we can support, create global impact overseas as well, and with help a social impact. So doesn't create just another revenue stream. So it's all about those people, and they might not be in formal leadership roles. What I notice sometimes that, in the faculties or in other departments, unassuming role might actually be an informal decision maker. So it's important. That's why it takes time to understand how, the new place really works. And it takes time, and it's not easy. It's sometimes scary, and sometimes you make mistakes, which is fine. You learn from those. So yeah, it's a completely different. And, I think you worked for Macquarie before, so you understand how sometimes frustrating the change is, because people get used to this mindset. Oh, we've done this for many years, so that's how we do things. But with the speed of change now since COVID, and things will never go back to normal. I think this is the new normal, and we need to adopt. We need to listen to students more. And I'm, again, thankful for my teaching experience, because I'm immersed in the classrooms, half of them international, half of them domestic, and I still get to experience the challenges students going through, or they, what are they into now, which, social media channels, or what they're talking in bit like in their breakout rooms once they, jump and just listen. It really helps with my day-to-day work as well.
Do you have a favorite technique or tactic for being persuasive in that kind of context of trying to create change or do something new inside an institution? Is there something that's worked for you?
Well, I'm always trying to find what's in it for them. So if I really, need to implement something and it's a big change or a different way of working, I'm really trying to put myself in someone else's shoes and think, okay, so how this change that we really need, how this might help their department or their day-to-day work, and also thinking of, how to make it a bit more efficient and effective, because I think we all share the same tie, like just exhaustion of quite, administrative nature sometimes of our jobs. And I know, international education sounds very glamorous and learning abroad, but at the end of the day, you do the, hell of a lot on your just laptop, multiple spreadsheets, multiple systems. Sometimes they don't talk to each other. So it's a lot of work. And if we can make the process smoother or quicker or easier, that's a win. And usually it involves multiple departments and multiple teams. So how we can find this, shared pain that we can all work towards to decrease, that's what helps sometimes. And just being, personable and trying to get to know people on a bit more personal level, on a deeper level, as we discussed just now, not just, yes, this is your job, but actually, what do you like? Why you're here, what drives you. And it's not always, again, straightforward, not always easy, but I find it really helps with work, taking a bit more sort of, personal connection, and sometimes shared love for dogs or board games or hiking or horse riding.
Yeah, just having those different points of connection is definitely an asset, isn't it? It's actually funny, as you were talking, it made me think about some of the ferocious gatekeepers that I've worked with over the years. And, people that, when you speak their name in an institution, everyone goes, oh, no, they're so tough and so hard to work with. And in fact, I always loved working with those kind of people because to me, they were quite predictable. You can see what they're trying to do. It's written all over their approach to work. And once you understand that, you can see how you can support them in that goal and how in being empathetic to what they're trying to do and their approach to things, then you can build that rapport, not necessarily on a personal level, but on a working level, because you can deeply appreciate why they are enforcing the rules so strictly or, refusing to approve X, Y, or Z. And once you have that point of commonality, then you can explore ways to do new things together rather than just trying to ram things through. So, yeah, interesting the sort of working with people of different working styles. Comes back to curiosity, doesn't it? You've got to be curious as to why people, work in a particular way. And often, people like those gatekeepers or managers that maybe say no to a lot of stuff, often it's because there's some backstory there, like something bad happened, somebody, abused a budget, and as a result, that manager is now really tight on their budget. They're really strict on their oversight because they were burned before. And in fact, that becomes easy to work around, doesn't it? Because then you're like, well, all I need to be is a lot more transparent, a lot more upfront about what I'm doing, over-communicate about it, and that allays the concern of that particular, person. So having that curiosity for the origin story, I think, is a great advantage.
Absolutely. And it's all about those, past experiences and maybe difficulties or some that really could have happened years ago. But then this person carries on, and that's why I find it really fascinating to work with people who are, scared to change their, jobs for their companies, because I find it's the quickest and the most helpful way to really meet different people and also learn different working styles and preferences as well. Because again, working for the same company or institution really, helpful sometimes. You get to know people and you sort of relax into what you do because everything is predictable and you know what to expect. If this person is really difficult, they will always be that difficult, so you can work around this. But then changing and being curious to, bring this change to yourself, sometimes in a forceful way, it's really, blessing and a curse because you do get to learn more about yourself first and then others around you.
A bit of a left-hand turn maybe just to take us to the end of our conversation. So once again, your LinkedIn profile says a non-tourist destination explorer. So what to you makes a good non-tourist destination?
You ask really good questions, Rob. And I remember years ago, I used to travel purely for sightseeing. I wanted to see that particular museum or this, attraction. And it's interesting how my attitude towards travel has changed throughout the years. So now I tend to travel with purpose. So it's either work conference or I want to see a particular friend and spend time with them, or it's an anniversary or some sort of occasion or a course I would love to do overseas. So I can't remember last time I went something just purely for the sake of, beach holiday or exploring this particular city or a country. Maybe because I've done it quite a bit in my life, both for fun and for my jobs. But and also I wish I had time for a bit more slow travel to really immerse yourself into culture, immerse into the way how people live and think and approach life. Another fun fact about me that not many people know, I used to house sit in Sydney for a number of years, many years ago. So I didn't rent anything. So I was moving around from 2 weeks to a few months. So that's how I know Sydney really well. And that's my way of slow traveling and exploring different areas and suburbs, because as we all know, each suburb in Sydney is quite different and has different vibe, different people, different sometimes political views or, approach to economics as well. So I probably had jobbed or, had coffee in each of the suburbs in Sydney because it took me maybe 18 months, this whole sitting journey. It was absolutely amazing. And again, I built connections and we're still friends with some of the, homeowners, and I love spending and looking after their cats, dogs and homes. So that, my way of sort of non-tourist exploring, not only the place where you live, but also traveling overseas. There's so many opportunities like, house sitting or, help ex volunteering for someone to truly immerse yourself in somewhere, beyond London or Paris and New York.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting with you on Global Horizons. My very last question before we wrap up, just because I love hiking and the outdoors and everything. What's going to be the first major trek/hike you're going to do in New Zealand?
Excellent question. There's so many, literally, an hour drive from Auckland. It's really hard to choose from. And I keep asking, so every Monday I keep asking my colleagues, so what have you done on the weekend? And then I create a list. So now there are probably 10 hikes on my list that I will start doing. So I'll share with you once we, hit the first one.
Perfect. Yara, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
Global Horizons podcast is brought to you by the Global Society, Australia's learning abroad support company. For about 10 years, the Global Society has been supporting Australian learning abroad teams with technology, training, consulting, strategy, marketing, you name it. We all know that learning abroad is time-consuming and complex, so if your team could use a little bit of extra support, reach out to the Global Society, globalsociety.com.au.
Today's episode was recorded on Garigal Land in Sydney, and we pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging. Thank you. See you next time.